Hey, what's up, y'all? So I just wanted to do a quick little video on the G25-660 install and kind of just warn you of some of the issues you might come across, because I previously had the 2867R on this car and it was a very straightforward bolt-on process, but this turbo seems to sit a little different on the block, and it kind of sits sideways. So I guess first thing, this coolant hose on the back of the turbo has to be all the way over or it's gonna hit the block. And so I have it as far over as I can to get to the left side of this piece on the block. And the main issue that I encountered was the oil return hose that goes from the turbo to the block right here. As you can see, it goes over to the left. So from the turbo to the block, it veers over to the left right there. So what you gotta do, you gotta bend the oil return hose over like that so it'll fit, but then you have this gap. So the kit comes with a spacer. I'm like, okay, the spacer is probably to accommodate that. But the issue I ran into is the studs going to the turbo like that, boop, then it steps down to bolt up the oil return hose. And I threaded these all the way in, and I only had a little bit of space on the end of the stud whenever I put the washers and the nuts on there. I was like, all right, well, let's just clamp down. Okay, started tightening them down, and lo and behold, I stripped the nut and the threads and messed it all up. So my advice would be, if you're doing this install, you gotta bend this, you gotta use the spacer, you have to use 3 gaskets, but either don't thread the studs all the way down so you can have a little bit of extra thread space, or just don't use the washers. I think if I wouldn't use the washers on the studs, I would have had plenty of room, and I probably did over torque them because I was like, oh, I'm not threading into aluminum, I can crank down on them, and I stripped them out. So in my case, my solution was I just drilled out these holes a little bit, and I'm gonna actually use bolts to go straight up into the turbo, which are the same size as the big end of this stud. But that should fix the issue. Other than that, this turbo is pretty much the same. It's pretty much identical to the GTX series. You can go on, me personally, I went on Stratified's website, and they have instructions for install and that sort of thing. And it's pretty straightforward other than that. And then you can find info on the external wastegate. It's basically just plug in the holes, and you're gonna have one port for vacuum. You're not gonna do the water cooled situation or anything like that. Also, yeah, just a little bit of information. This is a fully built 2-liter long block that I built in the garage. So if y'all have any questions about that, feel free to leave it in the comments and I can get to it, or I can just make another video and that sort of thing. One thing I would highly recommend is keying the crankshaft. So Speed Performance offers a service where they machine a little keyway into the crankshaft, which, sorry, but everything's in the motor I would show you, and it just locks the timing sprocket, oil pump sprocket, and the camshaft pulley, crankshaft pulley into place, so nothing can move around at high RPMs, and it makes it a lot easier just assembling. And if I were to ever take the crank pulley off, I don't have to pop the valve cover, lock cams into place, put the cam thingy, little thing that goes in there. Don't have to put that in there. I just take it off and put it back on, and nothing should move. So that's all fine and dandy. Fully built 2-liter, hopefully can hold up to 700. Already put the LSD in there. That was a super easy install. I actually left the races in the transmission, did not take the old races out, which I know. I just put new bearings on the limited slip. I didn't check the preload or whatever. I put it in there. I didn't do shims. And it seems to be fine. I think it'll be okay. What I've been told, if you replace the races, then you have to measure your play, vertical play, and then put shims in and have that dialed in. One more thing, there's not a lot of information about installing an ethanol content gauge, which I'm excited to have, because there's always that question of, am I at the right ethanol percentage, or how long do I need to drive it before I can make pulls and my ethanol content's good. So everything's already installed, but I did end up running the cable for the gauge back across the front of the engine bay and through this grommet over here, which was very easy. I'm using the Innovate gauge and sensor, and what I did was I literally cut this low pressure fuel hose in half and put some of these 5/16 to 3/8, I believe, Bundy things, quick release. So that's gonna go boom straight over here. Sensors in there, nice and easy. Let's see if I can get this door open. So one other thing. Oh, you can't really see it. 1 second. 1 second. I was gonna show y'all. Where I put the gauge, which y'all might hate me for this, but I like it. So there it is, right there. I drilled a hole in there. I'll slap that sucker in there, and it's out of my line of sight, but I can still see it while driving. Can peek down, see what my ethanol content is. But it was a fairly pretty easy install. Just grounded it out under the steering wheel, and I ran a power cord up over here. Ran a power cord underneath there. Just took the panel off under there. You can kind of see it right there, that blue one. And I used a fuse tap, which, if you don't know what that is, it just clicks into your fuse box and has a little wire sticking out of it. You can run power to an accessory. So it's nice, easy, clean install. And the cord that goes to the sensor was long enough to run all the way from the gauge, over here through that rubber grommet and back where it needs to be to hook up to the fuel line. So fingers crossed that works well, but I've already put power to it and the gauge comes on and everything like that. So yeah, if you have any questions about the build, feel free to let me know. Built 2-liter G25-660 0.92, limited slip, stage 3+, spec clutch, and I'm going to be running 4-port and Guardian Angel upgraded map sensors. I'm hoping for a reliable 550 plus wheel. It'd be nice to have a reliable power like that, and maybe if I get discontent, put some nitrous to it next year or farther down the road. So yeah, I think that's about it. If you want to see more details about the ethanol content gauge install, I can kind of tear into it and show you exactly what I did, but it was very straightforward. And unfortunately, I didn't record any of the motor build, but there's a few guys out there you can go watch their videos or read on forums about how they did it and what, you know, little things they ran into. Or also a good source would be Mazda Speed engine builds. Pretty much the same thing for the most part. You can go watch guys build those motors and get a lot of good info out of it. But yeah, there's nothing, really not many issues I ran into. The transmission was pretty straightforward. Building the motor was fairly straightforward. I mean, if you just stick to the process. Oh, and one other thing. If you are building a 2-liter or you're putting cams in, this is going to have, so I said fully built 2-liter. It's actually pretty much a stock head. It's just got 80-pound valve springs with stage 3 Piper cams. If you are doing this, I got the motor back together. I had the valve cover off. I had everything timed. And I was turning the motor over, checking valve lash. And there was this horrible clunking sound as I turned the motor over, and it kind of scared me. I was like, what is this horrible noise? So I kind of figured out it was coming from the VBT area, and I called Speed Performance, and I was like, hey, is it supposed to make this sound turning it over, you know, without oil pressure, obviously? And I was like, oh, yeah, it's going to clunk around a little bit. I think it has something to do with the 80-pound springs, and it kind of jerks the cams around a little bit, and it just pops that VVT back and forth because it doesn't have oil going through it. So just beware of that. That's something I encountered, and it kind of took me a little bit to figure that out. But I'm excited for the build. Y'all let me know if you have any questions. Poof.